SEC conference call a little while ago, and surprised I only got one question about Dane Bradshaw. But I'll go ahead and kind of repeat the point I was making. I think looking at this past weekend, it's just there's so much drama already in the league. It just jumps out at you. First things, you know, there are 12 teams in the league with RPIs inside of 100. And our RPI right now is 87 this morning. And that's really significant. That really speaks to the overall strength of the conference. The conference, to me, looks stronger top to bottom than any time that I was in the league. We always had, there were always 3 or 4 teams that really struggled, 3 or 4 teams that even if you didn't play well at home, you beat them, and you could get them on the road too. And that's just not the case, I don't think, this year. You know, Kentucky gets stretched to what, 3 overtimes, and in the first weekend. Arkansas, you know, is 2-0 and got a 13 RPI and goes on the road and wins at Georgia. And we know Arkansas has historically not won on the road. Alabama has struggled on the road, and they go to Tennessee and beat Tennessee. Georgia and South Carolina are 2 of our better RPI teams. You know, teams that have had really quality non-conference records and beaten some good opponents. And, you know, based in large part by virtue of the teams that they're playing, they haven't won their first game yet. You know, LSU plays in a couple of overtimes, and you know, they're an NCAA tournament team, and you know, Ole Miss is you know, Andy's just still doing what he's always doing. Texas A&M, you know, they take Kentucky to the overtime situation. You know, Vanderbilt and Tennessee and Auburn, you know, we all split. Florida picks up where they left off. Haven't lost a conference game since 2012-13 season, regular season game. Looks like they're playing some of their best basketball right now. So it's just a really, I just think it's about as interesting a first week as you could have.
Along those lines, what do you think it's going to take for, those numbers are great and all, but for the national perspective to change, and not necessarily just based off numbers, but what they see with their eyes? You
know, it's funny. When the math is against us, it's all about the math. And when it's all about the eye test, it's all about the math. You know, so I don't know which is which. All I know is that the math's important, and you take a look at, you know, I just know that, you know, that, like, for example, Ole Miss is 55 in the RPI. They're 6th in the league right now as far as the best RPI. That's kind of an RPI that usually gets you in. We'd take 6, wouldn't we? You know, we'd take 5. And I said from the very beginning of the season, I think we'll get 5. So what's it going to take? It's going to take 5 or 6 teams going based on the math and some of the eye test. What is the eye test? The eye test is Kentucky beating everybody, like, you know, by 40, and they go to overtime against Texas A&M and Ole Miss. Call it what you want. You know, I mean, that's, you know, Kentucky's not, you know, they're not point shaving. They're trying to win They're trying to win games. And they're trying to dominate their opponents, and they couldn't dominate 2 middle of the league SEC teams right now with Texas A&M and Ole Miss. So I mean, so I think we've got some math, and I think we've got some eye test. You know, Florida did not have the non-conference record that Billy's had forever, because he's carried the conference in the non-conference. You know, because he had injuries, and he had you know, some guys that were out. And so conference play is probably as important to Florida this year as it's ever been. And I think Billy's got to be really, really excited and pleased that the conference went about and did the work that we did in the non-conference with our scheduling and with some of the wins, but mostly with our scheduling, so that now he got a chance to make the tournament by beating SEC teams. Whereas before, we used to make the tournament by beating non-conference teams and then just not getting killed in league play. League play should help our conference get more teams in the tournament.
Speak to the math for the conference as a whole, to the math as it applies to you guys. You haven't gotten that road win yet. You're going to Florida and the difficulty that is, and then the short turnaround for South Carolina this week. What could this week in particular mean when it comes to the math for you in this program?
Well, 1996 was the last time we beat Florida at Florida. Florida hasn't lost an SEC game in 3 seasons, relatively speaking, and so we have a lot to play for. It's a very tough to play. It's a very tough place to play, one of the toughest in the country, and Florida will challenge you from the standpoint of the way they press, the way they turn you over, the effort that they play at. Florida plays as hard as anybody in the league. Billy Donovan's always been, in my mind, one of the top 2 coaches in the league, so I'll put him there. Just a great challenge. And then, as far as South Carolina is concerned, it won't be. It's a short turnaround and a short prep. But the way we do things, I spent Saturday night for a little while, all day Sunday and last night, getting ready for South Carolina. And then late last night I shifted to Florida, and I'll stay on Florida till we play. So I'm actually ready for South Carolina. Our game plan is ready. And then we'll come back on Thursday night late and put it in Friday, and then a couple times on Saturday. And so, I mean, obviously it's a challenging week. South Carolina plays, I believe, Tuesday and at home against Alabama, and then it's got all week to prepare for us. So South Carolina's got a pretty big advantage.
Bruce, last year, as much of a struggle as it was, these guys, as far as the guys that are back, really almost pretty much had Florida beat in Gainesville, and then let it get away right at the end. Does that help any as far as just the belief going down there that, hey, that it can be done there?
It might. They're a different team. We're a different team. Last year, what's Florida's approach to playing Auburn late in the year? What's Florida's approach to playing Auburn right now? I hope we have a bigger target on us than we did last year. I would think that that's one of those we got to get through this and get on to the next one. Whereas now all of a sudden Auburn comes down with a decent RPI, decent team, and it maybe should mean more. So we're not going to sneak. We're not sneaking up on anybody. That's one of the problems when you hired me. Okay, I'm not sneaking up on anybody. I'm a guy that people are going to want to beat as badly as they're going to want to beat anybody, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
You're a guy that's known kind of for passion and for entertaining and making it fun. Simeon Bauer seems to have some of those same qualities on the court. What do you think about the muscle flexing, the passion he plays with, and all that?
Not everything I do will the coaches or the players agree with. Not everything that the players do are things that I would do or that I would necessarily agree with. But I want my players to play with emotion. And I do want them to have fun playing. And I want them to play with some freedom. I want them to have sportsmanship. And I want them to be the best example they can possibly be, but I don't want them to be robots. And as long as the actions are fairly positive, not taunting, then I'm okay. I'm okay with it. When a player crosses the line, and they will sometimes, we'll address it and try to reel them back in. But there's nothing so far that I see that's not just, good old-fashioned hustle and emotion.
But forgetting the muscle flexing, does he kind of fire up the team during games? Does he try to?
Yeah, I mean, I think he has a, physicality to him and an effort to him when he can inspire you. When he got the flagrant one, I think it inspired us, picked us up defensively, and I think one of the things that our team's got to understand, they got to learn, is what we do is not very good unless you play that way all the time. And we don't play that way all the time. And when we do, like we turned it up. We turned it up a notch. We turned it up a notch. Why don't we start the games turned up? Why don't we start the half turned up? And that's my job, is to try to get us to get there. Because again, our system's not very good. What Florida does, Florida plays 10 guys double-digit minutes. Only one guy plays more than 30 minutes. That's the way I want to play. I want to have less drop-off when we go to the bench and greater depth. And that's what I want to try to develop as you develop a program. And that's what Florida has. So as a result, our guys are going to see from the tip this weekend, guys that play hard and play physically. We think we had a hard time keeping Missouri off the boards. Wait till you see South Carolina. And they all play with, you know, I like to try to think my guys, would play with an edge. Frank Martin's guys play with Frank Martin's edge.
Bruce, when Billy went to Florida, Florida was a middle of the pack at best kind of program, and he's obviously turned it into a national program. Kind of what have you seen that he's done that's made that happen over the years?
Well, I mean, he brought great credibility. He then brought great players, and they won, and they won a national championship and got to Final Fours, and then he stayed. And his family, Billy went down there as a young family man, and what's kept him there is probably being a family man. The fact that his children got to grow up in that school system and the youth sports and comfortable with the church, and because he's had tons of opportunities to leave. The Florida basketball program is a lot better than it used to be, but without Billy Donovan, the Florida basketball program isn't that much different than a lot of the other programs in the SEC. It's because of Billy being there.
You mentioned the point guard play improving lately. KC seems to be doing a lot better, both in production and also facilitating. Just what have you seen differently from him the past couple of games? Well,
I mean, KC leads the league in steals, and so that means that he is alert off the ball and alert to make defensive plays. And I'd like to have that same focus and alertness to how we break pressure or how we execute offensively. And again, the thing I've asked KC is I need to be a little bit more like him and chill, and he needs to be a little bit more like me and be a little bit more focused and have a little bit more attention to detail. But he is a confident player, and that helps him.
Early in the year, you kind of viewed him almost as a defensive liability at times, especially the first handful of games at Colorado in particular. What has shifted there? Is it building comfortability, or is it rising to the occasion and meeting the expectations that you're asking?
I think part of the ability is you get exposed. You get exposed, you go in the film room, and you can't justify it. You can't explain it. The tape don't lie. And then all of a sudden you've got to answer to your teammates. And KC's played 2-3 zone at New Mexico State for the last 3 years. And so he's, we play different. We just play differently. And if we had some other personnel to press, he'd be really good in pressure because he does anticipate things. So I just think, look, there are some things we can't control, and there are some things that some deficiencies we can't control. But what our identity could be is that we really scrap on the defensive end. If I could get more guys to play like Taj defensively, our guards especially, be pretty good. And then when we guard, if we can find a way to keep people off the boards, we're pretty good in transition. We're a pretty good running team. So those would be a nice couple of niches to be able to carve out. We get to the foul line a lot. We turn people over a lot. We're pretty good in our first shot defense, and we run the ball pretty well. If we could do those things and those 4 or 5 things became our identity, we'd be a good team. And I need KC to be, as our starting point guard, to be bought in on all those areas.
Sounds good.